Two from Galilee. A love story by Marjorie Holmes.
Today we begin the 12th in our series of readings from the book Two from Galilee, published by Fleming H. Revell Company and written by Marjorie Holmes. We're beginning chapter 9, and in our last episode of Two from Galilee, Mary told her parents about the miracle that happened to her when the angel came, announced to her that she was to have the Christ child, and then God overtook her being. Mary is now a few months pregnant, and she has been told by her father to tell Joseph about all this. We'll find out Joseph's reaction today as we continue in chapter 9 of Two from Galilee. Joseph was late that evening. He had wanted to finish off the batch of mortar he had made before it set. Then he could not resist gazing at the growing shape of his labors. It stood there, glowing with a soft and secret fire that his very ardor had blended into the clay. It had no roof as yet, but he had already begun the stairs that would lead to an upper chamber. It was going to be a good, strong house, sturdy and graceful, as it clung to the hillside, and it gave him satisfaction that it adjoined no other house. In time it could be expanded, so that their children could have more room. Their children, his and Mary's. He turned abruptly, hurried down to his room to wash and draw on clean garments. His whole body was pulsing with love as he strode up the hill to be with Mary. He had never felt closer to Yahweh, whose sky arched above him, riddled with stars. It was as if his head and shoulders were crowding and thrusting among them in a proud, bright sharing of joy. He sang as he hastened toward her that night. He felt blessed above all men. But there was something arid and vacant about the house of Joachim. He sensed it as he approached. The family had come down from the roof, if indeed they had gone up at all. Hannah was putting the children to bed. When she came out and found Joseph there, she gave him a curt, startled greeting and disappeared again. But there was no predicting Hannah. Joseph went into the garden, where he found Joachim pacing, and Mary sitting in a strange attitude of quiet. Something was in the air. He could taste it, feel it. Yet his earlier sense of elation was not to be denied. The life force was still throbbing within him, his awareness of a coming fulfillment. Mary, sitting with her head bowed, had never seemed more beautiful, or her father's greeting more kind. "Peace be with you, Joseph. Mary, come see who's come." Joachim's tone was rather anxious. He turned then with a brief nod and left Joseph and Mary alone. Mary rose, gazing at him in a way that pierced him oddly, a direct and searching look, yet fraught with concern. "We must talk," she said. "Let's go up onto the roof." "Can't we walk down the path a little way instead? It's a beautiful night," he said. They must be alone. "The flowers are so fragrant. Let's walk down to the olive grove, please, Mary." She nodded almost absently. She moved ahead of him, her robes catching on the blooming oleander bushes, her sandals sounding like the scurrying of little animal feet along the stones. She moved swiftly as if in flight, yet she suffered him to catch her hand. How small it was, how cold. "Wait," he cried out, laughing. "My darling, wait for me." She halted, and he could restrain himself no longer. He swept her into his arms. He tried to find her lips, and was the more aroused when she twisted her head away. "Mary, have you no idea how much I love you? How I think of you, nothing but you all day? But you've been so far away lately," he said, voicing what he had dimly sensed. "Come back, my beloved. Come to me." He was pleading in a way he'd never pleaded before. His breath came hard. "Oh, Mary, my bride, hold me. Hold me close." It was too much. It was folly, for Mary broke wildly away. "No, no!" The concern he had sensed earlier had become an intense alarm. "You must not say such things," Mary said. "You must not do such things. It isn't right." "But I love you. We're betrothed. We're husband and wife in the sight of God," said Joseph. "We cannot. We must not. It isn't right." Joseph responded, "Right according to the cruel and foolish customs of Galilee? or right in the sight of God. They were arguing now, and that was wrong. That was the only true wrong, to be separated from her in spirit, as indeed they had been separated these past weeks. What had come over her? What elusive yet insistent thing, changing her, making her so aloof and troubled and withdrawn? Had she grown tired of him? Incredible. Such things might happen among the heathens, but never among the decent women in Galilee. Never his Mary. She loved him. She could have no regrets, and certainly no other man. She loved him. Yet he stood shaken and baffled, searching himself for error. Desperately he regretted his outburst. He longed to cradle her against him, gently, without passion. He longed only to know the touch of her once more. "Forgive me if I've spoken or acted rashly, Mary. I promise to bridle both my tongue and my desires. Only, please, don't look at me like that," he begged softly. "Don't draw so far away from me." She had backed up against the trunk of a tree. Her hands were behind her, clinging to it as if for support. Her face was a small white oval, hung between the dark mists of her hair and the sheltering tree. "Don't come nearer," she whispered. "Joseph, I beg you, don't touch me. There's something I must tell you." Her lip trembled. It was a second before she could go on, but her eyes were unflinching. "I am with child." In the silence that followed, he could hear her breathing. Or perhaps it was his own blood pounding in his ears. There was the incessant rattle and chirp of insects in the grasses and the trees. Somewhere a dog was yelping, a wild and eerie sound. A bat dipped out of the star-weighted skies as if to mock him, then wheeled away. Numb with astonishment, he could only gaze at her for an eternity. When he spoke one word, one alone, which later seemed to him almost as unbelievable as the thing she had told him. "Whose?" "I don't know." "You don't know?" His hands, dangling at his side, felt wooden. A kind of paralysis had come over him. He couldn't have moved nearer now if he had tried. "Mary, are you mad? Or do you think I am?" "Perhaps," she said. "Perhaps I am mad. At first I thought so. How can it be, I asked myself, that I am the chosen one? How can it be? There are fairer girls in Israel, and certainly purer ones, girls whose only wish had been to serve in the temple, to fast and to pray. No, there had been some mistake, I told myself. Yes, I've been very close to God, especially in my childhood. There were times when I felt that he even spoke to me." Again she paused, as if in a struggle to find the words that would make it clear to him, or to herself. At last, drawing a deep, painful breath, she went on. "So when it happened, when the angel of the Lord God himself came unto me and told me that I was to be the one, the chosen one, the one whose body was to carry the Christ child," she made a little gesture of imploring. I could not believe it. I dared not believe it, Joseph. I was dazed. I told myself, surely it's a dream or madness. But then, gradually, it came to pass, what the angel had foretold. My body has been changing. It's not fitting that I describe these changes, but they are happening, Joseph. They're real. Even my mother can confirm them, that I must surely be with child, and it can be only the child of one, of the Holy One himself, since I have known no other man, not even you, Joseph, my husband, not even you." He stood, frozen, uncomprehending. The lance had only stunned him as yet. It had not pierced his breast. He could thrust it almost impatiently aside. He said in a voice that sounded puzzled and astonished, and yet somehow every day, "The chosen one, my beloved? The Christ who's been expected for so long? The Messiah whom so many people, good, honest people, have believed themselves to be?" "You don't believe me?" she gasped. Her eyes were stricken. She pressed one hand against her mouth to still its trembling. "You don't believe me? For all your reading of the Scriptures, your voice in the synagogue, those discussions you had with my father, you don't believe?" "Mary, I do believe," he assured himself, and her. "God will keep his promise. The Christ will come to us one day. But not now? Not to us in our time, in our town, to us and our neighbors, not to you and me? No, this great event is something that will happen far away to other people. That will make it credible, won't it, and safe. Mary, you're right, he said quickly. It isn't safe to trust ourselves too much to such beliefs. You've seen them yourself, the zealots and the false prophets being whipped down like dogs in the streets. You've heard them crying on the cross. His voice caught. As for the women who've imagined themselves to be the chosen ones, well, as you say, I know all too well. They're laughed to scorn. They're the butt of scandal. No, people won't have it. Any evidence that God will keep his promise, not if it's personal. Personal involvement in God's plan is too terrible, isn't it? It costs too dearly. She took a step nearer him. Her eyes were burning in the white, leaf-shadowed oval of her face. But isn't the test of faith suffering and sacrifice? A willingness to give up everything, if need be, Joseph, for what we claim to believe? Everything. To give up everything. He felt faint. His Mary, even his Mary, to deliver her unto the miracle that he, like all good Jews, had prayed for. The thought was staggering. He could not accept it. If it must happen, let it happen elsewhere, as she said. Let this honor fall upon some other woman whose body was not already pledged to a man who loved her beyond all reason, better than even life itself, yes, even more than God. And now the shaft of the spear that had struck him down so unexpectedly out of the night plunged deep, deep as if in punishment. I am with child, she said, the child of Yahweh himself. Even he of Joseph's lifelong covenant, God, the victor, God, as he saw now, the rival. Rage smote him, and fear, and a wild, pleading rejection. He rebelled with all his being. He would not have it. Let it not be, let it not be. Yet I am with child, she had said. And if this were truly the case, and not some fevered confusion of the mind, if this were a mortal child, then she had betrayed him. Oh, Joseph, Joseph, she said softly out of her own desperation. Don't think elsewhere. Think about me. I'm going to bear a child of flesh and blood, and if you cast me out, then— Cast you out? He said, for the shaft stirred in him deeply, bloodily now. Cast you out? He groaned again. Yes. She moved closer. She was small and pale with fear. If you divorce me for adultery, then they'll stone me in the streets, Joseph. You know the penalty for adultery. He said, unable to keep out the bitterness. Surely the God who's chosen you for such an honor would not let such a fate befall you. Oh, Joseph, have pity on me, she said. She was at his mercy, this chosen child of God, this honored bride of the Most Holy, and he was rocked by it, destroyed by the very power he had over her and the fruit of her outraged womb. He was unmannered. Her tears dissolved him, so that his own eyes were dim as he folded her quietly against him, stroking her hair with his work-scarred hands. And there we'll stop in the middle of Chapter 9 in our reading from the book 2 from Galilee. Tomorrow we'll find out more about Joseph's reaction to this miracle. As we continue in 2 from Galilee.